Let's get things started! This hand of mine glows with an awesome power!
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to the G Gundam podcast. Why? Because I can't name it anything more proper than that. It's where me and my lovely wife Andrea review episodes of Mobile Fighter G Gundam. I will eventually get the title right. I'm your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drak, and also, like I said, is my lovely wife Andrea. How you doing?
Good.
So we had 4 episodes that covered a lot. One of the complaints that I kind of have about G Gundam is that it loves what is called the Exposition Dump. Do you know what that means?
Yes. You just get dumped with a bunch of revelations.
So exposition is storytelling, and they basically just hit you with a bunch of it. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, in my opinion, some of the exposition dumps can be avoided. There are some here that probably can't be, because they kind of have to happen this way. But let's go ahead and get right into it. So we are going to be covering today episodes, 41 through... I have to actually look it up, guys. 41 through 44. So let's go ahead and start things off with episode 41. The Battle Royale begins, Dark Gundam Revived. So this is the kind of the prelude episode to the Battle Royale. So all of the contenders for the Final Battle Royale at Lantau Island have been decided. Some of them were not actually able to claim their title, because if people remember, in the previous podcast, it was noted that Shadow Gundam was the other Gundam that had actually gone without a loss, except when he faced up against Domon. So at that point, like, we can pretty much guarantee that Schwartz would have earned a spot in Lantau Island. Mm-hmm. But remember, he got really injured, and we had some interesting revelations with that character. And we're going to get into that, but first, let's just go ahead and go into kind of the preparation. We get to have kind of a final moment between Domon and Rain before they have to say goodbye, because Domon cannot have a crew while he is on Lantau Island. Whatever his Gundam can do is whatever his Gundam can do. However, he makes Rain offers to do something for him, which is basically, since she's a doctor, they can't get any answers on Schwartz. Neo Germany will not let anybody see him. Nobody will, and they won't answer anybody. Which makes sense, right? Like, your Gundam fighter's hurt, you let immediate family in, but you don't let anybody else in, kind of thing. And so, since Rain is a doctor, she offers, I will go and check on Schwartz for you. Because remember, the big revelation was, for some reason, Schwartz looks like Kyoji, Domon's brother. And so, Domon's obviously very confused by that, and so is Rain. And so Rain offers to get answers, kind of thing. So Domon heads over to Lantau Island along with Saisaishi, Chibity, George, and Argo. We also hear the other contenders that made it, which is kind of interesting. So let's go over this really quick. Zeus Gundam made it. Or Zeus Gundam qualified. Cobra Gundam qualified. And Jester Gundam qualified. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar?
Pretty much.
Isn't that the group that Mikkolo pulled aside? Yeah, so they all got it, and obviously Neros Gundam and Royal Gundam are also there, along with the defending champion. I'm sorry, I have to do this like Paul Heyman. The reigning, defending champion of the Gundam fight, Master Asia in Master Gundam. So we have all of those. I'm trying to think if we're missing anybody that got revealed there. No, I think that covers all of them. So the Battle Royale begins. People start fighting. Specifically, they show that Saisaishi and Argo have a round 2, along with Chibity and George have a round 1, I guess, because we've never really seen them fight. So that's happening, and Burning Gundam is basically, looking to confront Master Asia directly. And while he's doing that, he's also seeing this interesting mirage. He's seeing a mirage of Noble Gundam while he's out there. And he's like, what's Allenby doing here? Because we haven't seen hide nor hair of her since she got kidnapped.
Yeah.
All the while, we also get a few moments with Wang Yunfa where he's basically plotting behind Master's back. As far as he is concerned, the Dark Gundam belongs to him, and he has already picked who should pilot it from here on in, which is Alan B. Beardsley, under the Berserker mode. So, like, he's already plotting against him. Master is just basically looking to be Master Asia. Like, he's willing to challenge Domon, but he has to beat his challenges first, kind of thing. You have to be worthy to challenge me. And so we'll cut from that, because a lot of that is kind of not brought into this episode. Instead, we're going to cut to Rain, who finally got into Schwartz's room. Pretty much confirmed he does look like Kyoji, but what's interesting is, so Neo Germany has no idea what's going on with Schwartz. And so they decided to bring in an expert, Rain's dad, Dr. Mikamura, to help out with this. And Dr. Mikamura is just in shock at seeing this. And something happens, like a big emergency happens or something like that, and all the other doctors leave, and they're like, we'll leave Schwartz in your care. To which we get to see kind of a personality shift from Dr. Mikamura, don't we?
Yeah.
So he instantly goes to a point of, he's not like going to be a doctor. He's not going to help he's not going to help Schwartz. We're going to say Schwartz because we'll get into that. But he's not going to help Schwartz. In fact, he's already picking up a scalpel and is ready to kill Schwartz. And he also kind of reveals a few things. Now, what he doesn't know is that the other person in the room is Rain. Rain is hiding behind some medical equipment, and she's basically hearing him confess to a lot of things. So let's dive into this. This is like in my opinion, the essential exposition dump, because up until this point, Dr. Mikamura is painted as a good guy. Like, he's an ideal scientist. He just wants to help his best friend, Dr. Kashu, be able to get out of cryostasis. Okay? Well, now we find out a couple of new factors into that. It seems that Dr. Mikamura had a bit of a jealousy problem when it came to Dr. Kashu. Were you shocked at that? That he, like, because all up until this point, they are all painted as, we're best friends. And now we're finding out that he actually was very jealous of the man.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
What did you think of the weird personality shift from this meek, kind old man to basically psychopath? Like, he's ready to kill him. He's ready to kill Schwartz.
I just cannot believe that.
Out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, that was just weird. I mean, it was strange for him to say, you cannot trust a Kashu.
Yeah, that's kind of the first where you're like, huh? But you're entrusting a Kashu with the Shining Gundam to defeat the Dark Gundam. So why are you saying you can't trust a Kashu?
Yeah, and then now you're like, man, he would go to extreme lengths to just because of a jealousy thing?
Yeah, so let's explain what this jealousy thing was. Basically, Dr. Mikamura had Dr. Kashu look at his prototype for the Shining Gundam. And Dr. Kashu was very worried about what he was trying to do. Like, he was trying to make anger be the one emotion that kind of triggers the hyper mode. And thankfully, we found a way around it, but Dr. Kashu was obviously very worried because, there are other more powerful emotions than anger. That was kind of the last straw for Dr. Mikamura. He was sick and tired of seeing Dr. Kashu succeed while he was just kind of in the background. So he then found out about Dr. Kashu's latest work, which we find out was not always called the Dark Gundam. In fact, it was called the Ultimate Gundam, and it didn't have a purpose for the Gundam fight. It instead had a grander purpose. Dr. Kashu built it to save the Earth.
Mm.
What did you think of that? Like, this Gundam that we've been considering to be absolute evil, it was actually meant to have a good purpose in mind.
It was an awesome idea.
now the 3 theoretical abilities look kind of cool, right? They don't look frightening.
Yeah.
But he wasn't looking to have this Gundam be in the Gundam fight. He was going to have it rejuvenate the Earth, which we have been seeing throughout this whole series. Has, like, Earth is degraded quite a bit. Civilizations have fallen. All of the cities look wrecked. You know, Hong Kong looks fine. But if you go outside of Hong Kong into Lantau Island and a couple of other places, it looks horrible. And so the premise of the Ultimate Gundam was to fix the Earth so that it's habitable again. And so it's not this it's not this huge wreck. And so at that point, you know, the 3 theoretical abilities of self-recover, self-multiply, self-evolve all would have gone to strengthening the Earth. Now, I said this to you early on, and I don't think I mentioned it in the first episode. One of the things that Gundam is known for, due to its directors, it's always got an anti-war message. All right, so it's kind of funny. It's all about the giant robots, right? But there's always a narrative that war is bad, and you should never want war, kind of thing. And also that we should be taking care of the Earth, because it's our home. It's, you know, like, this is where we will stay, and this is where humans are always going to flock towards. Even if we went out into space, we would eventually flock towards the Earth, kind of thing. And so you kind of get your first bit of this. What did you think of that? Like, because I mentioned it to you, but I'm guessing it wasn't at the forefront of your mind.
About what?
The anti-war message, and we must protect the Earth.
I guess that's kind of expected, you know?
Well, I mean, so I guess the first thing I want to get into is the fact that this Gundam was meant to rejuvenate the Earth. Like, did you question that as to how those principles could have, or how those theories could have done it?
I just assume that it's, you know, if it's going to help the Earth, that's what it's supposed to do.
So you didn't question that it couldn't do it?
No, I would think that if they were intending to make it...
I bring this up because there's actually a lot of theories via Gundam forums and things like that, you know, one Gundam probably couldn't have done the job, even with the 3 theoretical abilities. But I'd like to think that it still would have at least gotten a chunk done. And maybe, like, over time they could develop more Ultimate Gundams to be able to come down and resurrect the Earth.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe if it didn't take care of the whole planet in one go. Yeah.
Something like that. And so at that point, when they were working on it and it was ready for completion, Mikamura ratted them out to the military. And now, the kind Major Ulube that we've been seeing up until this point, he's not looking so kind. In fact, it looks like he's kind of the money grubber and he wants the Dark Gundam for himself. Kind of thing. And we also learn the actual reason that Domon's mother died. Because Dr. Kashu told Kyoji to get into the Gundam and run, and his mom took a bullet for him.
Oh, yeah.
So, we should clarify, for Kyoji. Because remember, Domon wasn't there.
Yeah.
Domon was off training. But his mom took a bullet for Kyoji, and he escaped with the Ultimate Gundam.
Yeah.
Okay? There's more to this story, but we have to stop here, because that other part will be explained in a later episode. But up until that point, like, what was going through your mind, in my opinion, or in just, like, sum it up, what was going on through your mind that everything we learned of in episodes ago, when they tried to do that whole simulation with Domon, all of it was pretty much a lie?
I am just dumbfounded and shocked.
And Rain took part in it.
I know.
But to her, like, here's the thing, and I've seen a lot of people blame Rain for this. People forget. We learned through the Sate episode, she was off in college. So she wasn't there either. So she's been equally as manipulated as Domon has. In fact, she is, like, basically having a nervous breakdown this entire time, learning that her dad is a monster. And it's actually kind of a sad moment for Rain, because, like, she looks up to her dad and she doesn't want to think ill of him, but he just confessed and she was in the room.
I wouldn't blame her for that, you know?
Like, tears streaming down her face. She can't believe what she's hearing. And I can't blame her either, because, like, if you'd seen, like, this tonality shift with your own parent, that's frightening. Because you never want to think your parents are capable of that.
Oh, yeah.
They are, but we don't want to think that way. And then she gets to see that dark side of him. So I actually do like the performances here. I think they're really well done. And like I said, you know, there are some exposition dumps that could have been fixed in the series. This needed to happen this way because you knew, and that's that episode of You Can't Trust Akashu, you could kind of see it at that point. There's something building within Dr. Mikamura, and he might be like wanting to bring it to the surface. And so at that point, this is how he brings it to the surface. And it's frightening, but it's supposed to be.
And it's really sad that it's like Domon and Rain have kind of grown up together, and yet he was willing to destroy the family just for his own greed of this whole thing.
He was sick and tired of taking a backseat to Dr. Kashu.
It's just really sad.
We keep calling him Dr. Kashu because I'm going to just go ahead and tell you guys, to my knowledge, we never learn his first name. All right? We never learn Domon's dad's first name. So that's why we keep on saying Dr. Kashu, because we don't know. Mm-hmm. And even his mom, we don't, like, that's why we constantly said Domon's mom, because we don't know who she is. They've not given a name. We also should clarify something really quick. In all of those backflashes, there is one person who is not present, and that is Minister Corrado. So Corrado, even though we've thought he's the bad guy because he's the bureaucrat, he is not part of this. Mm-hmm. At least to what we know, he is not part of this. This is between Mikamura and Ulube. So at that point, these are the two culprits.
Ulube's
he's the dude with the mask.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So this kind of goes into another Gundam stereotype. Dudes with a mask can't be trusted. Mm-hmm. Because every character in a mask has something going on, either their own agenda or a hidden past or something like that. And technically, even though it's not really because in Gundam, a lot of the characters have a big flamboyant mask that is very out there. For example, the first one, Char Aznable, he has a mask that basically resembles a samurai helmet. All right. But Ulube's, it looks like a Phantom of the Opera mask. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to see. But yes, Ulube is technically the masked character in this and has his own agenda. Do we know what that agenda is? Not really. We know that he wanted the Ultimate Gundam for his own power. But, you know, so basically he's kind of like Wong. Mm-hmm. So now we cut back to Lantau Island, and Burning Gundam is fighting against Zeus Gundam. He trashes him pretty quick and moves on. But then Zeus Gundam comes out of nowhere and challenges him again, except he's brand spanking new. And immediately Domon is concerned by this, and as well he should be, because we actually get to see that Zeus Gundam has been infected by DG cells. It is a servant of the Dark Gundam, and so is Markalot. So we could pretty much guess that probably Cobra Gundam and Jester Gundam are also. We don't know that, and to my knowledge, in the episodes we see, we don't see it. Yeah. But that's already frightening. And also, when we have this revelation, Master Asia decides to announce that, yes, the Dark Gundam is actually on Lantau Island. And it will be basically making its debut into the world. So a bunch of Gundam heads come out of nowhere, and we get to see the Dark Gundam appearance that we've seen from Shinjuku and Guyana. With that, though, after properly taking care of Zeus Gundam, we then have once again Domon challenge Master Gundam, and Master's like, no, first you must face the 4 kings of the Dark Gundam, and the first one is Neros Gundam, who we then see transform into what we've been calling Bird Gundam, but now we can officially call him Sword Raven Gundam. And that's kind of where the episode ends, is that, okay, the mystery Gundam that attacked Domon was in fact Mikolo.
I guess I'm not totally surprised now, because, I mean, sure, it's kind of like, how did it become that from this? But
we've been kind of guessing that maybe Mikolo has some access to DG cells, and this pretty much confirms it.
Because otherwise it's like, well, then at least now he seems to have at least a purpose for being there and not just be randomly there for what the heck.
And I do like the fact they upgraded his Gundam, because Neros doesn't really have a whole lot going for it. I've actually heard a lot of forums call it Mad Max Gundam, and it's not entirely wrong. It doesn't really have a whole lot going for it. However, Sword Raven Gundam, holy crap, that looks cool. So let's get into the analysis really quick, since we're going to be talking a lot about Sword Raven Gundam in the next episode. What did you think of the full-on transformation?
That was a pretty awesome Gundam, though.
It actually makes sense with Mikolo's traits. Like, I especially love the fact that, those big old talons as part of the bird, they kind of transform into these boots that have this ginormous spike coming out of them. It's like, okay, now the silver feet kind of makes sense. Like, this massive kick could just wreck your Gundam kind of thing. I especially love that. I like one of the things I actually love about it is that when the helmet comes out, like the headpiece, it's like the beak basically comes out and splits in half to show the face. That's always been cool to me. The overall transformation is just amazing for Sword Raven Gundam. It's actually far better than Neros Gundam. And I love the fact that it was revealed in the final round. Because, you could have that lame Neros, and then you have this big reveal of this is the new Gundam. And that actually makes more sense with Mikolo's character. So, all right, with that, let's go ahead and get into episode 42.
You don't want to score it?
Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad. Final score, I'm glad you remind me on this, because I just barely gotten off a work shift and I'm tired. So what did we think of Battle Royale Begins, Dark Gundam Revived?
I'd probably maybe give it a 4.5 maybe.
I'd probably give it a 4.
4, yeah.
Because again, I can't criticize it for the exposition dump. Kind of needed to happen this way, and it actually does a really good setup of what we can expect on Lantau Island.
Yeah, I mean, at least it was pretty interesting to find out what we learned.
Yep. So I'm there with you. A 4 out of 5. It did good with what it needed to do.
I'm still kind of like trying to figure out what do the guards or the people from Germany know that there's a different person impersonating Schwartz?
Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Because he went into the hospital without a mask. So it's just like, oh, that doesn't... And what's funny is in later episode, we see what Schwartz actually looked like. And he's like, that's not right.
You would think, what? Where did this guy come from?
Yeah, let's get into this right now. We actually see Schwartz in a later episode, and we'll get into that. But he's actually pretty old. He's easily 30 years older than Kyoji.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to wonder if somebody in this Neo-German team has ever seen him, because he's participated in multiple. I don't think this is clarified in the series, but if you go into additional stuff, they have said that Schwarzbruder has fought in previous Gundam fights. So it's just like, nobody caught on to this.
Yeah, because it kind of just seems like they did this this magic thing where they don't even notice the difference.
Like nobody knew what Schwarzbruder looked like. Like, if you're a Gundam fighter for your nation, you pretty much think, your posters everywhere in the colony. Everywhere.
I don't know. It just kind of seems weird. And yet, why on earth would they be bringing Dr. Mikamura in when he's from Japan?
Well, they actually do explain that.
Oh, yeah.
That he is the leading resource on cybernetics.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually like that. They do actually justify why because they say at the beginning, we shouldn't be bringing in another nation on this, but you are the foremost expert on cybernetics.
True.
So I do like that they did that, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
And not to mention, it's kind of like It's like, wow, they didn't even know this guy was like an android of some sort. Or
no, and that's the word that they use, is that he's an android, which is not the word we would think, but
well, yeah.
Yeah, he's an android. What? He's Commander Data? He's significantly missing the butterface, is all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd say 4 out of 5. I think that's justified here. Let's go ahead and bounce into episode 42, which is Assault of the Four Evil Kings, Gundam Heaven's Sword. So it's in reference of Sword Raven Gundam. So we get to have a lot of fight throughout most of this episode in regards to Sword Raven Gundam versus Burning Gundam. And we get to see like the full potential of what Sword Raven Gundam can do. We weren't able to see that really because of the smoke screen. So we have lots of really cool abilities here. Yes, he's got the kicks, he's got the silver feet, but he's also got these talons that will come out and they're basically sharp blades. I think they explode too, and then he just respawns them because he's got DG cells in the thing. So, you know, they could constantly make these giant feathers that he can shoot out. He's got these massive wind attacks that he can throw out, including one that kind of combines with fire. And as we see later in the episode, he can absorb energy and just send it back out. I'm sorry, but Sword Raven Gundam's kind of broken. If he was in a fighting game, it would need some balance very quickly. So because it kind of gets to a point where it's like, how is Domon supposed to win out of this, right? Like, how on earth is he supposed to go? I mean, you tell me. Like, did you think that Domon had a way of winning with how much they were kind of promoting what Sword Raven Gundam can do?
It would be a very intense battle. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but do
you think with the fact that it was throwing out fire, do you think Erupting Burning Finger would have worked?
It would be a long shot.
Yeah, it actually would be. Thankfully, though, Domon's not fighting alone, as Saisaishi and Argo have joined the fight to help out in the Shuffle Alliance's cause. So they're now taking on Sword Raven Gundam all together. But there's a little bit of an issue here because Domon needs to get to Master Gundam as well as to the Dark Gundam and end this now, because this can't go out forever. They will lose against the Dark Gundam if they have to do that, because they'll run out of energy and whatnot. So the first thing that Saisaishi and Argo kind of do is, and this was actually kind of a cool moment, they all do a triple Gaia Crusher. That was kind of cool. Like, wow, in 5 minutes you taught everybody how to do the Gaia Crusher, Argo. That's pretty awesome. And they create a tunnel for Burning Gundam to go through to get to Master Gundam. And then Argo and Saisaishi take on Sword Raven Gundam after Burning Gundam hasn't been able to do much against it. And one of the biggest things that they do that is kind of sad to see is both Saisaishi and Argo enter hyper mode, and they do their biggest attacks. So the Dragon Gundam Butterfly mode, I'm not saying the full name. It is so hard to say. It's like Ryusei Kochoken, or see, I can't even do it. I'm murdering it right now.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the Graviton Hammer. So we didn't get the Gaia Crushers, the ending ability of Argo. Instead, it's the big mace. Basically, they're just trying to ground Sword Raven Gundam so that they can make it explode. Once they ground it, Saisaishi takes one of its spears and just wham right into his head. And to which Sword Raven Gundam promptly explodes, and it looks like takes Saisaishi and Argo with him. So we've technically seen Saisaishi and Argo die in order to stop this menace, which obviously makes Domon very distraught. As well he should be.
Oh, yeah.
During this whole thing. And it's actually a pretty epic moment for all of them. Specifically for Argo and Saisaishi. They got an epic moment out of it. Both through working together and also through that epic, like, see you later, mister. And then we never hear from them. It's really sad to see, especially since it was like a really good fight. We should come back to the hospital, though, as now that Dr. Mikamura has been handled and he's been properly lectured by Rain. Rain is livid with him. Unfortunately, Schwartz is of the opinion he needs to go out to Lantau Island. He needs to go and help Domon with the Dark Gundam, but he's injured. There's a processor in his... I'm not even going to try and explain the pseudoscience here. There's a processor within his body that is not allowing him to regenerate with the DG cells. So what he basically proposes is that Rain give him a jump start. Can you call it anything else?
Nah.
So she takes these big old electric forks, jabs it into Kyoji's side, and he is just screaming this entire time. But you can see that the DG cells are rejuvenating. And he's like, oh my gosh. And she's even not happy that she's doing this because of all the pain that it's causing him. But thankfully she gets him healed. And Schwartz then decides, like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go help Domon. I'm going to get in Shadow Gundam and we're going to get out of here. And I'm going to go to Lantau Island. While Rain kind of stays behind to deal with her dad. And basically, from what we can tell, get him to the proper authorities. Like, call the police and get them to watch him. We also get to see that she will join the fight with the second Gundam in the hangar that was reserved for Major Ulube, the Rising Gundam. So it looks like she's going to take the Rising Gundam in the next episode to go to Lantau Island herself to help Domon. Which, that looked kind of cool, right?
Was that like a spare Gundam or something?
It was a Gundam that was, quote, reserved for Major Ulube. That's all we know. Like, that's kind of... I'm confused about it, too. It feels like they had spare Gundams, which I think would have been against the rules. Like, you kind of have to stick with the Gundam that you have. But then they say it's, like, reserved for Major Ulube. My guess is that maybe he used it in a previous Gundam fight or something like that.
Okay. Or
maybe because he's in the military, he gets his own gun. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. I was just wondering, I'm like, hopefully that wasn't the same one from...
And we'll get into that in the next episode because we actually have a bit of a focus on it. But Rain basically takes it and is using it to go help Domon. So that pretty much kind of wraps up the episode for this one. So final thoughts on Assault of the Four Kings, Gundam Heaven's Sword. I'm not trying to abbreviate things so bad, but like this is basically what's happening. The first episode, there were two focuses. One, Lantau Island, one, the hospital room, where we're learning all this stuff about Dr. Mikamura. And then the same thing happened here. Lantau Island, Rain and Kyoji kind of thing. So yeah, final thoughts on it.
I'm going to give it a 5.
A 5? Okay, give you a reason.
I think it just had a mix of a lot of great stuff, especially, with the fights and the humor and the good moments, I just liked it all.
Okay. And I think also part of the exposition dump also happens in this episode too. Like Kyoji kind of explains the Ultimate Gundam and all that stuff. So we might be merging things here and there, but
oh yeah.
I'm going to give it a 4.5 but only because I kind of wish there'd been a little bit more done with Rain chastising her dad.
True.
I kind of wish that would happen. Because like they kind of make Dr. Mikamura just like they look like this, oh, I'm so sad at this point, and they kind of just ignore him. Being the monster that he is. I kind of wish that we got a little bit more chastising with it. And maybe even have Kyoji explain this rivalry between Dr. Kashu and Dr. Mikamura. Because I actually think like we should have gotten more information with this. We should have seen like all of the accomplishments of Dr. Kashu compared to Dr. Mikamura to show the jealousy that Dr. Mikamura was going through. And we don't really see that. We only see Shining Gundam versus Ultimate Gundam. And obviously there's going to be a divide between the two of them. But one of the things that I wish this series had done, remember we talked about the hospital room where Dr. Mikamura was called the foremost authority on cybernetics. What makes you think that if Dr. Kashu was around, they'd call him instead as the foremost authority? Am I wrong?
No.
Yeah, so at that point, like, I kind of wish we'd gotten more information on the jealousy concept, which is kind of brushed over at this point. So it's kind of disappointing. So I'll give it a 4.5. You're going for a straight 5. Let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is episode 43, Royal Counterattack, Ambush of the Grand Gundam. So while Domon makes it to a little bit closer to Master through this tunnel, he is then approached by the next king of the Dark Gundam, Royal Gundam. And we already know how effed up Chapman is. And, well, we learn a lot more about him, so his Gundam transforms into what is called Grand Gundam. I hate this name for it because there's nothing grand about it aside from it's huge. But okay, we'll go with that. So we get to have Burning Gundam try to take on Grand Gundam, but he kind of fares about as well as George did. He gets stepped on, he gets kind of crushed a little bit here and there. We also see an interesting new mechanic from Grand Gundam, where instead of shooting out cannonball or like bullets, it's launching out these hands with chains to be able to grab people. I'm just going to say it now. Grand Gundam to me should be more called Awkward Gundam, because there are a couple of questions I have to it. And let's bounce into the analysis of Grand Gundam at that point. How does it move around? How is it able to have such huge power in light of the way that this episode kind of paints it? It just looks like this big lumbering mess of a Gundam that maybe if things were ideal, like surprising George, would be a threat. But you could, like, all these Gundams are so small, so much smaller than it, they could probably outrun the damn thing.
Yeah.
So like I love Raven Gundam. I think that's a perfect embodiment of Mikolo. Grand Gundam, what the fuck were they thinking? It doesn't even represent Chapman.
Not to mention, how did such a small Gundam, such as Royal Gundam, end up turning
have
into
all of that in it? Yeah, right. Like, Rita Repulsa doesn't exist in this universe. You can't make the monster grow. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, how did this tiny little Gundam become this? And yeah, I despise Grand Gundam. I hate it. It makes no sense at all. It doesn't even fit with Chapman's motif of being being a sniper. It doesn't. Yeah. Because it's all about being up in your face and brute force. And even when Chapman is in Royal Gundam, he's still playing the sniper effect.
Jeez, that would probably be more suited for Argo than Chapman.
Yeah, or Andrew.
True.
Andrew, that would make more sense, but Chapman? Oh god, it's so bad. But yeah, Domon starts losing badly to it, so at that point, it's time for Chimney and George to step in. And oh jeez, there's so much wrong with this fight, but obviously they do the same thing that Argo and Saisaishi did. They try to they try to distract the Grand Gundam while Burning Gundam heads for Master Gundam, to which Domon's like, I already lost Saisaishi and Argo, I can't let you do it. And they're like, you must let us do it. And so he's like, all right, fine. See, here's my problem. With Argo and Saisaishi, that was epic. It's not here. It's not. There are some good moments in here, but it's just not epic here. So Chimney and George try to fight it off. They're not very successful because it's a big lumbering oaf of a Gundam that is able to just basically crush them. And what's even better is we don't see the boxing mode of Maxter at all in this. Like, instead, they decided to focus on Maxter's little pistols going up against ginormous Gundam.
Mm-hmm.
The fuck were you thinking? Of course that's not gonna work. If the Rose Bits, and there's thousands of them, at least that's the way that they kind of painted out with the Rose Hurricane, thousands of them, and Ed can't make a dent, what makes you think your little pea shooters can?
And yet, how do you run out of ammo?
Well, I mean, limited. That at least I'm willing to give them. Okay, limited supply of ammo.
Mm-hmm.
I'll even guarantee like Rose, because I think at one point they even say Rose ran out of Rose bits. Okay, I'm okay with that because it makes sense. You know, like you wouldn't be able to have infinite ammo. You'd have to run out eventually. That's okay because the bullshit that happens because of that is way worse. So we'll get to that in a second. But Chimney and George run away and decide to have kind of their final hurrah and kind of wish themselves a good life, as it were. It's actually kind of funny because they both have like some booze in their Gundams to celebrate. And George comes out and chastises Chimney for having, I can't remember what he had. It was like whiskey or something. And George chastises him. And while he's chastising him, he's holding a wine bottle. Oh, God. Because, I mean, I'm not saying that Neo France shouldn't have had a wine bottle. I'm okay with that. But he's chastising him for having booze in the cockpit. And look what you have! Mm-hmm. Yes, I have issues with this. That George is being all knightly and chastising everybody, and he's breaking the same rules, too. But we do get to have, like, this epic moment where they give their Gundams a little bit of the booze. And then they kind of do the whole christening thing of like smashing the bottles against the Gundam. I kind of like that concept because we get to have a little bit of a friendship blossom between Chimney and George. Dare I say a bromance. But then the next bit is... Oh, it's so bad. Chimney has one shot left. To which they decide that, okay, Rose will lure Grand Gundam to where Maxter is just below it, and Maxter will take this tiny, like, accurate, like, you have to be really accurate to be able to hit this. And we've seen nothing of Chimney being a marksman. Like, this is something you expect Chapman to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I have a problem with this. So Chimney's waiting, he takes the shot, and of course... Grand Gundam hears that and moves out of the way. Please tell me you were face palming when you saw that.
Oh yeah.
Because even I saw, like, when I saw this for the first time, I was like, I saw that a mile away. That he was gonna hear the shot or something was gonna, like, he would go, oh look, a pretty bird, and then whoo, okay, well it's not gonna hit you. And the hope was that they could hit the cockpit and kill Chapman. Oops. Well, now they have no ammo, except George notices in the distance on some cable or whatnot that there is a rose bit that has not been used. And so he then gives, I don't know how, he gives the rose bit to Chimney, puts it in his gun, and they fire it at Chapman, and they get the cockpit this time, and Grand Gundam is done. But it looks like a big explosion that looks like it took out Chimney and George. There's so many levels of calling bullshit that I could do in this whole moment. Like, did you have any problem with any of that? Why is a rose bit compatible with Neo America gun technology?
Who knows? It was an unusual fight.
It was a stupid fight is what it was. Easily, Saisaishi and Argo versus Mikolo is better than this. And it's not because I'm not saying that George and Chimney are inferior. It's because this whole fight is stupid. Like, this would make a whole lot more sense if the Grand Gundam had a different design, one more befitting of a sneaky kind of sniper guy who could make, like, I actually thought about this, like, the second time I ran through it. What should really have happened here is you should have gotten, like, more of a sleek sniper model that maybe has, like, a really fast and stealthy mobile mode, but could also make mirages of itself so you can, basically going into the copy gimmick that Manon did, and just like, oh, you can fire from multiple angles. That's what this should have been.
Otherwise, I think it would have probably been a lot better off if you got this big lunking Gundam, then they should have probably mixed up the Shuffle Alliance, like maybe Argo taking on this big bad boy versus, because...
Well, and what's even worse about it is, okay, so with Saiseshi and Argo, we got to see all of their abilities, right? We got to see Dragon Gundam Butterfly Mode. We got to see the Gaia Crusher and the Graviton Hammer. And with this fight, Rose did the Rose Hurricane, but there was no bursting machine gun punch anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that's kind of a crying sin here. It sounds to me like for a big old Gundam like that, you would want something that can hit multiple spots at once with great power and precision. Like, why? Why did you stick with the pistols?
Yeah.
There's so much wrong here. So that happens. I need to get off of this because it's just making me mad. And then we have another plot thread that equally drives me crazy. So when the Battle Royale started up, people remember that there's like this giant wrestling ring around the planet, right? Well, they erect a similar barrier around Lantau Island. And everybody's shut in. So at that point, like the Dark Gundam can just pick off all of the other thing. So all of the crews are waiting just outside of Lantau Island and have noticed, oh yeah, we see the Dark Gundam. This is a problem. We need to get in there. And so they then when Schwartz comes up to them and says like, there's no way in, we then get to see Rain in Rising Gundam. And we'll get into the analysis there in the next episode because it'll matter more there. But we should say this: we got a whole new fight suit animation for Rain. What did you think of that? So much more tasteful, right?
It's much more better than the other one.
It's actually reflective of Domon's old one, where she kind of she dons the same poses, but they don't show off America's ass or Neo Japan's ass. They actually avoid all of that, and they instead make her look like a capable fighter. Holy crap!
And with the wonderful high heels.
Oh yeah, that's right. The fight suit comes out to make high heels. The hell? Really? That just makes me think, okay, does that happen for Allenby too? You have to think about it, right?
Yeah.
If it happens for one, it probably happens for the other. When it makes no sense. Anyway, we'll get into Rising Gundam in a minute. A plan is hatched where basically if Shadow Gundam and Rising Gundam create enough of a force field of their own, like a miniature barrier, they can bring the barrier to them and create a minor hole, like a tiny hole, where someone can sneak in and destroy one of the ring posts, and the barrier will go down. Which they promptly elect Princess Marie-Louise to do.
Well, actually, didn't she volunteer?
No, yeah, that's right. She volunteered.
Because everyone was like, no, you can't do that.
I have to ask this really quick. If you were going to pick somebody to fit through that narrow a space, who would you have picked amongst them? And let me give you who you can pick, because you can't pick Rain and you can't pick Schwartz. All right? Here's who you can pick from. Bonnie, Kath, Shirley, and Bunny. I'm not even going into that because, I can't keep those names straight. I was thinking, do I have all the names right? I'm not even worrying about it. Jiminy's four mommies. You have Zuisen and Keun. You have Princess Marie-Louise. You have, I can never remember his name either. George's butler. And then you also have Nastasha. Who would you pick to go through that narrow a space and destroy the ring post? She's looking at me like, are you really asking me this? Yes, I'm really asking you.
I just still can't picture how...
No. Give me an answer. Who would you pick?
Well, I'm just trying to decide.
Okay, all right.
If
Maybe would you pick the person with military experience?
I would have picked Nastasha since she has more an idea of how... I can't see how Marie-Louise know what to do when she got over there to take care of that.
But no! We go for the teenager who's never had to do anything dangerous in her life. No, we don't go with the military person who could easily do this and frankly would probably and I'm guessing this is why they didn't do it. She'd probably strip down because it would make sense. Like, you don't want the clothes touching the barrier, as we clearly see with Marie-Louise. So, you might have gotten a nice bra and panty shot from Nastasha. Hey, more fan service. Hey, dude. You and I have both conceded. Nastasha's pretty hot.
And then Argo would have been like...
Argo would never have known.
True. If he would have seen that, he would be like too busy watching.
Oh, trust me. Given the outfit she wore for him that other night, there's not much left to the imagination for Argo. So, I'm just saying, man, the slit on that skirt, it went up so high, there's no imagination anymore. You pretty much got her down. But yeah, she might have actually, stripped down and did her army crawl in there, and at least it would have made more sense than Princess Marie fucking Louise.
Because wasn't
even Suicide and Kayun made more sense.
Was it she that suggested that, or was it Schwartz?
What, the barrier? No, it was one of the 4 girls for Chibity's crew. They were the ones that recommended it.
Okay.
They were the ones that recommended the plan. They just didn't recommend the person to go through. As you pointed out, Marie-Louise volunteered.
Well, yeah, because she's like...
Yes, let's have Princess Peach go through there.
Because she's like, I'm the smallest one here, so I'm a...
How are you the smallest one here, Miss Poofy Skirt?
Oh.
You should be on fire right now.
And yet you're trying to go through with that poofy dress.
Poof, poof, and we see it explode over and over again. I swear, her back ought to have this nice big stripe down it of just ash, because everything was exploding while she was going through there. At least take the dress off. Oh, but we can't have the teenage girl strip. Then have the adult do it. Or, okay, you want to give some female fan service? Are you telling me the manly Shaolin monks couldn't do it? Have you seen a Shaolin monk's diet? Like, they gotta be pretty freaking thin. I'm pretty sure Kayun could fit through that.
Mm-hmm.
And all you'd have to worry about was an old man's loincloth. I'm very passionate about this. Why was Marie-Louise picked to do this? Anyway, she's picked, and her dress endures significant damage. And she then throws a grenade. I'm actually kind of surprised she knew how to use it. She throws a grenade at the ring post, and it blows up, and now the barrier's down. So Schwartz goes on to go help Domon. And Rising Gundam is kind of helping out with everybody else before she goes. But she's staying with the boat, at least for now. So that pretty much kind of wraps up the episode here. There's not really a whole lot that happened here. We kind of bounce between the encounter between Grand Gundam, Rose Gundam, and Maxter, and then also this barrier moment that they're trying to create. Final thoughts on Royal Counterattack Ambush of the Grand Gundam.
I'd probably give
2.5.
2.5 for you?
Yes.
Wow.
Because so much could have been fixed in this. Grand Gundam does not make sense as Chapman's evolved Gundam. The barrier idea, there's so many problems with it. Even with the concept of having this mini barrier created, you didn't think, what if that backfired? I don't even think the developers thought of that. It was like, well, it must succeed. No, what if it backfired? That would have been a big deal. It almost might have been cool to see it backfire once, and then they perfect it. But no, I have so many problems with this, and the biggest problem of it is the focus of the episode, which is Gundam Rose and Gundam Maxter versus Grand Gundam. To me, it's a worthless fight. So you.
I'd probably at least give it I would give it maybe a 3.
Okay, and your reason?
I mean, it was still pretty interesting with the fight with, George and Chibity against Grand Gundam or whatever his name is.
Okay.
But I probably think that could have probably been I think it would have probably been better if they would have changed the Shuffle Alliance if it was Argo and Chibity.
If it was Argo and Chibity, it would have made more sense. But then you have to ask this question. What would Saishi and George have done against Sword Raven Gundam?
I don't know, but
And there you go. That's kind of the problem. Because Rose is, up until this point, is still being shown as not really having anything going for it except the bloody Rose bits.
True.
Oh, but wait. You have that giant lightsaber where you could cut those limbs off. Nope. Can't use that. We have a punch that can hit 10 different targets. Nope, can't use that. That's kind of my problem. Like, I agree with you. If it had been something like that, it would have made more sense.
Because you think like
But then if you did that, then the other fight would suffer. It's almost like they didn't need to have Grand Gundam be the way it is.
I just think like, here you got this slow, huge Gundam. But it's like, Argo's not like probably as fast compared to like Saishi or maybe Rose Gundam. So it just seems like, okay. It's just like...
The biggest problem, like we keep coming to the same presumption here. The big problem here is the ginormous Grand Gundam. This should have been a much more different evolution. Much different.
I mean, I did love the whole conversation with Chibity and George. That was kind of
fine, and I'm okay with it. Aside from the whole, don't chastise the dude for having booze in the cockpit when you have a giant bottle of wine, and everybody expects you to have a giant bottle of wine. You're French. Oh, I'm sorry. The stereotype is coffee in this one because remember, barkeep, more coffee.
And I just love the whole thing. It's like they're telling Domon, you need to get going. And Domon,
yeah.
Well, at least Domon is caring about his buddies, getting in this fight and not just like, okay, see you later. Have fun.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on into the last episode, which is Schwartz Rests in Grace, Domon's Tearful Attack. This is another episode that kind of focuses in 2 different areas, but we kind of have to build up to that. So, Burning Gundam meets up with Master. He's pretty close to him now. But there's apparently another king of the Dark Gundam that Master wants him to see, and that is Noble Gundam. Except she's in full Berserker mode, and she doesn't really, she kind of recognizes Domon, but it's very clear that, it's the Berserker system talking. It's not Allenby. To which that freaks out Domon. He has kind of the same problem that he did when the Berserker system was activated before. It doesn't feel like Allenby. It feels like just a monster in there. And so he's kind of cornered here because he can't fight her. He just can't bring himself to fight her in this state. But that's okay because he doesn't have to. Because here comes Rain charging on in to take Noble Gundam out of the fight and then take her on in Rising Gundam. Which I think is a great idea. Because they've kind of been building up this jealousy angle, and this is kind of an interesting finish to it, but we'll get there. Now, a lot of people would immediately suspect, okay, so he's going up against Master Gundam. Not quite. The fight is more towards the Dark Gundam, except what makes it interesting is that now Schwartz has come in with Shadow Gundam to help out Domon while they try to figure out a plan, and also so that Schwartz can give a little bit of these answers to Domon. So we kind of go over the same exposition that we have this entire time, except we learn a little bit more when it comes to Schwartz himself.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go over that, and then we'll get into the fight scene between Allenby and Rain, which in my opinion is one of the most epic ones. So the first question that we get answered is, what is Schwartz? What is he? Like, he's an android. We get that. Why does he look like Schwartz? Why does he have Dark Gundam cells, et cetera, et cetera? And so Kyoji tries to answer, and now I'm going to call him Kyoji, because now we kind of find out what's going on. The best way to explain it is that where Kyoji's body is in the Dark Gundam's cockpit, Kyoji took a piece of his soul out, or a piece of his mind. I want to say soul. He took his soul out and basically said, you need to go and help Domon to be able to do this. To be able to take care of the Dark Gundam. And we find out why. Is because it's no longer the Ultimate Gundam. What do we mean? When Kyoji landed, some malfunction happened with the self-recovery, and immediately the now Dark Gundam turned on Kyoji and basically took the tentacles and said, get in here! And, like, shoved him into the cockpit.
Oh, yeah.
And basically used him as what they're calling a core life unit, to be able to maintain all these three theoretical abilities, but basically using Kyoji as kind of a battery to be able to power the Dark Gundam. Except with this malfunction, it's no longer acting the way that the Kashu's intended. And we should probably say Kyoji was also helping in development of the Ultimate Gundam. But it's no longer acting as intended. It's now the Dark Gundam at this point, or the Devil Gundam. So at some point, Kyoji kind of separated his soul from his body and said, you need to go help Domon. The way that he did this was that he came across the actual Schwartz Brooder, who is obviously like 30 years older than Kyoji, and had Dark Gundam cells kind of just like go over his body and make him into Kyoji's image. Weird. It's like weird T-1000 kind of justification. You know that one, right? You know the Terminator 2.
Kind of.
The liquid metal one.
Not really. I don't know much.
Okay, so in Terminator 2, there was what's called the T-1000. It was all made up of like liquid metal, so it could shapeshift and things like that. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of this concept. So they took the Dark Gundam cells, took over Schwartz's body, and remade it in Kyoji's image. So he is Schwartz, but he is not Schwartz. He is Kyoji, but he is not Kyoji.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me to try and explain it. That's the way it's explained. But Kyoji has a vital message for Domon with this. Is, that Kyoji's body is about to give out. And through some weird connection that they have, the body and the soul are connected, and Kyoji feels his life slipping away because of the Dark Gundam. And so he's like, you need to take care of my body. You need to destroy the Dark Gundam, because all you're doing, like, basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be ending my suffering. And it's kind of a sad moment, and obviously Domon doesn't want to do it. And we'll kind of cut it there, because the climax of the episode is actually this moment. We then cut to the what do I want to call it? It's the ocean arena that we've been seeing a lot of people fight at. Somehow Rain and Allenby end up there. But because of the Berserker system and what it's doing to Allenby, this triggers a transformation of Allenby into the third king of the Dark Gundam, which we never find out the name for it, but I know it because I used to have the model for it. It is called Walter Gundam. Basically, it's just this giant spike ball that eventually comes apart, and it's got like Dark Gundam or Dark Army kind of concepts to it, where it's very thin legs, but it's got, in my opinion, one of the coolest headpieces of this entire series, because the mask goes away and it's just monstrous. Reflecting the Berserker system and what it's doing to Allenby. So a lot of it is based in long range, and let's go into the analysis really quick. What did you think of Walter Gundam when you saw it?
That was pretty wild.
The best way I know how to describe it is it's twisted.
I know.
It's Allenby twisted. And it's, in my opinion, it's kind of the interpretation of what the Berserker system makes Allenby into. Would I be wrong with that?
No.
And it's also interesting that it goes from, like, Noble Gundam is a very melee Gundam. Like, she gets up in people's faces, whereas Walter Gundam is more long range. It's got long tendrils. It's got guns. It's basically, because it just doesn't have too many moving parts, it's intended to be more long range. And this actually engages a fight between Rain and Allenby. And now we can get into the analysis of Rising Gundam. So I love Rising Gundam because I think it actually represents, and this is going to be difficult to say, it represents Japan even more than Burning Gundam does. Why does it do that? Well, first of all, one of its main weapons is a big old Nagamaki spear, which is like traditional samurai.
Yeah.
As well as you have a function for it of basically having a bow. Like, the long bow of the samurai is actually a really cool concept. There are a lot of medical students and law students in Japan that would also be experts in being able to use a long bow or being able to use a katana kind of thing, because it's a way to be able to teach discipline. So as much as I love Burning Gundam, and I think it's a representation, it has the rising sun to it, it has samurai armor, this is also equally awesome in its interpretation of it. What did you think of Rising Gundam when you saw it?
Didn't we see Rising Gundam?
We've been seeing Rising Gundam in hangars up until this point, but it's never been used. You don't really see weapons or anything like that. You just see the body.
What was the name of the other Gundam that he was using before?
Shining Gundam?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities between Rising and Shining.
Okay, because I'm like...
Because, like, the chest plate for Shining is blue, but it's red for Rising. Yeah, there's a lot of... I would actually not be surprised if Shining Gundam was used as, like, the base blueprint for Rising Gundam. Except then that's when they diverged, and they said, okay, this needs to be different.
I mean, it's pretty cool, especially if it has different set of weapons.
Yeah, it's got the Nagamaki, it's got a shield, so it can have that Nagamaki spear as well as have protection, and then it also has the bow. And so it's very traditional Japanese. We actually get to have a pretty cool epic fight between Rain and Allenby, where we actually do find out something very, very sad. Because as soon as Rain takes Allenby away from Domon, she's just basically screaming, Domon, Domon, where is Domon? Like, she wants to fight with Domon. And we find out why. She's developed what looks to be a bit of a crush on Domon. I want to say crush because it doesn't really look like it can... Like, this is the problem that I have with the jealousy storyline, is that she's about as equally hard-headed as Domon.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, a relationship between the two of them, I just don't see it working out. Could they have a rivalry going? Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But a relationship based on fighting, there's not a whole lot there. And I honestly think, like, Allenby would probably get annoyed eventually when she had to deal with the brick wall that is Domon when it came to serious moments. Yes, Domon is caring and all, but remember, he wasn't always that way. Like, I'm pretty sure if Allenby had to deal with the Domon we saw in the first half of the series, she wouldn't have been half as patient as Rain was. And I want to make that painfully clear, because I've seen a lot of people ship Allenby versus Allenby with Domon, and I'm just not there. Because I look at it and go, okay, they've got fighting, but what else do they have? And that's where it starts to falter. Because outside of that, there's not really a whole lot to Allenby.
I think it's just like one of those platonic...
It's still a sad moment.
It's like those platonic relationships or something.
Well, it's basically, if you're like, it's a puppy love kind of thing, and it's totally on Allenby's end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that makes it sad, is like through the Berserker system, she's crying.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I love you, Domon. Where is Domon? And Rain has to be the one to put her down. And so it's like, okay, this isn't about how Rain's been kind of secretly jealous of them. Now she's having empathy for Rain, or for Allenby, and Rain has to finish this. So at that point is when she pulls out the bow, and we get to have this epic moment, in my opinion, where they take away the fight suit and they just basically show her as like a traditional samurai wielding a long bow. and she does the rising arrow on Vulture Gundam, but specifically a point where the Dark Gundam cells are infiltrating Noble Gundam, which is the receiver for the Berserker system. I actually like that. It's the receiver for the Berserker system. Mm-hmm. Of course it is. And so she hits it on target, and Vulture Gundam goes down. And so at that point, Rain just kind of, we're guessing is tending to Allenby at this point. But then we cut back to the ultimate climax of Domon's storyline, which is that Shadow Gundam, in order to help Domon get to the Dark Gundam, gets horribly damaged, enough to a point where Schwartz leaves Shadow Gundam to go into the cockpit of the Dark Gundam and hold up Kyoji's body and just like screams at Domon, "Finish it. End this torment." Mm-hmm. And with tears in his eyes, and you can tell he doesn't want to do it, Domon pulls out an erupting Sekiha Tenkyoken and aims it right at
the cockpit.
And we get to have this really cool moment where you get to see the two visages of Kyoji become one and properly say goodbye to Domon. And it's sad as hell to see, because now that we can see that Kyoji wasn't this evil brother that we were having him painted to be, he actually did care for Domon, and he did want to help him succeed. That's why he came along as Schwartz, to help him obtain a peaceful state of mind, and helped him so much. And now we get to see him finally pass away. Mm-hmm. And Domon is crying because he's done it again. What's interesting about this, though, is that while this is happening, Master's just watching, and he's already like contemplating in his head how Wong has gone off the plan and everything like that. But now he sees Domon destroy the Dark Gundam again, and you start to see a rage filling within Master, a huge rage, but also this disease that he's dealing with is now being much more prevalent. He's coughing a lot more. Like anytime he gets remotely upset, he is doing coughing fits. But you could see at that moment the rage kind of building inside of Master Asia. What did you think of that? Like with Master's reaction?
I'm just like, I don't know about him anymore, because it seems like
it's not going to help me to say this, but it's going to get worse when it comes to the next episode.
It's just like he's so conflicted now.
Well, and actually, what I actually like about it is that, next episode we'll get a lot of the answers about his conflict. And it makes sense when you see it. But right up until this moment, like, we just don't know why this guy is a villain. Because you have these touching moments where he's a master, but then they decided to make him like a Sentai villain. It's like, oh, I'll twist my mustache while I send out the Dark Army to look like me, kind of thing. And so it feels kind of weird that, we're still going into the whole concept of he is evil. Oh, and by the way, we should actually point out one of the main conflicts that are happening between Wong and Master is their viewpoint on who should replace Kyoji as the core life unit. Now, we can already kind of guess Wong wants Allenby to do it because he thinks that Allenby with the Berserker system is much more powerful. But Master is set on Domon because of all of the trials that he has gone through. He is strong enough to be able to pilot the Dark Gundam. And there are a lot of moments where he tries to convince Domon. Domon doesn't buy it. And then eventually he's like, no, F you. Beam Sash, I will force you to go into that cockpit, kind of thing. And Master's just basically trying to execute his plan to get Domon into the cockpit to be the new core life unit. Which is also just really twisted in a weird way. Because, like, why is Master giving such dedication to the Dark Gundam? Mm-hmm. But, yeah. So back into the moment between Domon and Schwartz / Kyoji. Come on, a tear was in your eye.
It was sad.
I actually like when the two become one, and he finally says goodbye. And he's like, holy crap, don't do this. Because they've already, this entire time, been hinting that, there's something more to Schwartz, as well as there's something more to the Dark Gundam that we haven't been told.
Jeez, I'd be like more along the lines of like thinking Domon would go back to like Neo Japan and be like, how could you guys lie to me like that?
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Because
But ultimately, we have to have the final round take over here, and it looks like the only ones left, because we've also seen the wreckage of Jester Gundam and Cobra Gundam by this point. It looks like it's just Master and Burning Gundam on the island, so they have to have their fight, and that actually will be the next episode there. But let's go ahead and get into our final thoughts on episode 44, Schwartz Rests in Grace, Domon's Tearful Attack. I'm giving this a 5 because both fight scenes were epic, both for Rain as well as for Domon versus the Dark Gundam. Because we can't really say Master was that involved. He was just like, get in that cockpit, Domon. Mm-hmm. But both fights were cool, but not just because of cool abilities and all that, but because of the stakes that were being put before us. Rain had to overcome Allenby, who was in love with Domon, and had to empathize with her enough to stop what Allenby was going through. And then you also had the moment of like Domon having to end his brother, but now his brother's not the villain anymore. We now think of him as a good older brother. And now you don't want to see Kyoji get ended, but you see his body. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, this has to end this way. So I'm going to give it a 5. I think they set the stakes the way that they needed to, and they explained things the way that they needed to. This is a good buildup, not only for what was happening in that episode, but also a really good hype moment, because I know what's coming next, of Burning Gundam versus Master Gundam, and seeing that all-out fight. So, a 5 out of 5 for me.
I'd go with a 5 out of 5 too.
Yep, it was a lot of really great setup.
I think it was really well set up.
Yep. So with that, let's go ahead and get into our awards really quick, our last minute ones. So what was the best episode that we had?
I would probably go with the last one. It's probably my most favorite.
Okay. So So just for what it tried to do. And what it tried to set up.
Trying to set up, what we're to be expecting, and, things are all falling into place. There was some great tension, and there was, the good and the bad, and it's just, overall, I think.
Well, I do agree with you that it is an awesome episode. I think this episode also deserves some recognition. Which is Assault of the Four Evil Kings, Gundam Heaven's Sword. Because, look, everything Saisaishi and Argo touch is just gold. I think we've pretty much come to that conclusion. Everything Saisaishi's in when it comes to combat is amazing! Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I also think this episode deserves it. Because, not only just because of what Sword Raven Gundam means for Miccolo, but also just having that epic takedown of Saisaishi and Argo teaming up to take down Miccolo. I think that also deserves some recognition.
Oh, yeah.
That fight scene had awesome stakes, and it paid off really well. What is the worst episode? Royal Counterattack, Ambush of the Grand Gundam. I don't even have to think about it. Because when you have that epic moment of Sword Raven Gundam, it just gets destroyed by what they did with Chibity, George, and Chapman. Just destroyed.
I probably would go with that one too, just because.
Because we can't really say that the build-up to Lantau Island was bad. It was build-up. But this one was bad.
Well, just because, you just expect, at least with Argo and Saisaishi, they almost like put everything they got and almost, get to the point where they almost look like they get destroyed in the process for the good of the cause, but it didn't feel the same buildup with Chibity and George compared to,
No. What makes it even worse is like there's actually scenes in the other episode where you kind of see wreckage of Bolt Gundam and Dragon Gundam. I don't think we really get that with Maxter and Rose. I'm not thinking of it off the top of my head, but I don't think we get that wreckage.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I agree with you there. So the best fight scene, we actually forgot this the previous episode, and I'm not going to go back into it because I like we kind of are far away from those 4 episodes. I don't want to necessarily judge it, so you guys tell us what you thought the best fight episode was, or fight scene was. For this one, here are the stakes. So we have Burning Gundam versus Zeus Gundam. We have, I'm just going to count it this way. I'm not going to count Domon and any of the other ones. So it is Bolt Gundam and Dragon Gundam versus Sword Raven Gundam. It is Gundam Maxter and Gundam Rose versus Grand Gundam. And finally, we're going to take the Dark Gundam out of it, and we're going to give it to Rising Gundam versus Volter Gundam. Which is the best fight scene of those 4?
I really liked the Rising Gundam and the
Volter Gundam.
That was pretty cool, especially underwater and all that stuff.
And it actually kind of painted Rain as a fighter. Like, this whole series has gone out of its way to say she's not, and now she kind of is.
It's like she's trying to do whatever she can to help Allenby because she knows how important Allenby is to Domon, and she's like, even if she could have her jealous moments, but she's like, well, I'm not gonna just ignore it.
I'll agree with you, but I'm also once again going to give an acknowledgement here to Dragon Gundam and Bolt Gundam versus Sword Raven Gundam, because that was badass. As a mecha fan, it made me very happy. I might have had an accident. I'm just saying. All right. The climax was amazing from that episode. So at that point, what is the craziest moment or craziest reveal that happened in these 4 episodes?
The craziest?
Yes. The reason I say the reveal is like, okay, now we could talk about like Dr. Mikamura. Was that the craziest thing? Was it that the Dark Gundam was actually meant to be a good thing? Was it that Kyoji actually wasn't or Schwartz is Kyoji, but not Kyoji? Like, what was the craziest freaking thing you saw happen in these 4 episodes?
I'm still, with the whole reveal with Dr. Mikamura. It's just like,
it is such a personality switch, isn't it?
Wow.
Even with Major Ulube, when you see the memory, it's just like, this is not what you've been seeing. Like, Ulube kind of makes it sound like he's caring about what's going on. But no, then you have this personality switch happen between the 2 of them. I'll agree with you on that one, but I'm also going to give some credit here to Kyoji and what he ultimately ended up being. And I'm going to mix that in with the Dark Gundam because I like the concept of, because all of this basically ends up being like, we had this great ultimate Gundam that was going to heal the Earth. It self-recovers once and immediately becomes Skynet. And immediately just says like, it basically goes, get over here to I want to say Schwartz, but Kyoji and uses it as the core life unit. It's like, holy crap, man. That is actually like the craziest thing ever. Like, sentient machine. Oh. And then it basically becomes the Dark Gundam.
Yeah.
And so it's appropriate to call it the Dark Gundam. So I got to give it there. What was the most hilarious moment that we saw during all this?
The most hilarious?
Yes.
I'm trying to think of one that I'm thinking.
There are a couple of silly moments.
I think the silliest one that I can think of off the top of my head is just the whole thing between George and Chibity. It's just, they're like trying to knock each other for just being like, you gotta do that, but then they just feel like,
see, that's what I call Maxter and Rose versus Grand Gundam, a laughing stock.
It's just like, you guys are
Chibity and George, the only good fight that they have to their name. Well, okay, Chibity has 2 fights to his name that are awesome. Him between Jester Gundam and him against Burning Gundam. Rose has one that's good.
It's just like they're trying to be serious, but at the same time they're like, okay, this is actually funny. It's like, really?
I'm gonna give it to Marie Louise trying to save us all through crawling through the force field.
True.
And how is she not naked?
How is she not naked by then?
Because, like, we even see, like, I don't know if you noticed this, but when you see, like, all these explosions happening with the dress, you could actually see that it's like one of those old Victorian dresses that had a wire framework to it. How did that just not ignite on fire and she comes out naked? Like, you've got to take it all off. Oh, wait, she's a teenager. We can't show that.
Well, I'm surprised.
It's almost like you should have had the Russian agent do it.
I'm surprised she's not under, like, all the way down to her, like, underwear or something by then.
Yeah, which I'm guessing would have been like that old school Victorian underwear kind of thing. But again, maybe you should have stuck with the Russian agent. I get it, fan service, but that's all Nastasha is. Okay? All that Marie Louise has been is annoyance. But Nastasha, okay, she's a pretty hot military officer. And then you gave the naughty bits when she went out skinny dipping. And then you put her in the just sexy getup with Argo during that date night. And that's what I'm calling it. It was date night. You couldn't have done that? Really? Like, it's not a stretch. Like, a lot of people know this, like, that follow Gundam are war fanatics, and we know that, you know, one of the things Russia used to do, especially when it came to secret agents, was put women in charm schools. All right? Like, a lot of people don't realize this, but Black Widow is actually based on legit things that happened during the Cold War. Okay? And so at that point, we could all just go, okay, she's a Russian military officer. Yeah, she would totally use sex against her enemies because that's what she's been taught to do. So at that point, she would have looked at that and went, okay, that's going to make my clothes explode, and I'm probably going to be lit on fire. All right, down to the bra and panties. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying go naked. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But go down to the bra and panties, which is probably going to be like military fatigues at this point, and just have her do it that way. Because that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
Like, the military fatigues for a female military officer is like what? Like tank top and panties. So at that point, it's not necessarily hot. I mean, on Nastasha probably, but it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
do you have to have her in the leopard skin underwear? No, that doesn't make sense. Just do it.
Yeah. That would have been awesome.
I love that my wife is agreeing with me on underwear choice. This is how far things have gone. But yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, that is the silliest freaking thing because none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
Even if they'd sent Kayun or Zuisen, it would have made more sense. Even if they'd sent, I'm even willing to concede, if they'd sent one of the 4 girls in, that would have made more sense because they were thin enough that I think that they could pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But no, you had to send in the teenage girl who was more poofy than all of you and honestly should be on fire right now. Oh my gosh. I just kind of like now I want to see an outtake somewhere of like she comes back onto the ship and she smells just like burned ash and everybody's like taking 10 steps away from her. It's like you smell like burning cat. So yeah, that's gonna go ahead and do it for this.
Well, there's only one other thing that I'm just kind of curious of.
Okay.
If one wanted to use Allenby as the pilot for the Dark Gundam, why didn't he just go and take Kyoji's body out of there and just put her in there to begin with?
Good question. I don't know.
It's like, how long were you gonna...
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Because, like, you put her back in Noble Gundam. I get it. It's probably a receiver for the Berserker system. But you went out of your way to make this new Berserker system. You couldn't have put a receiver in the Dark Gundam for it?
I could just imagine, like, if Kyoji would have died, it's like...
They even make it very clear that, like, the Dark Gundam has been moved from its hangar to Lantau Island. You couldn't have just plopped her in there at that point?
Because who knows? Maybe then Kyoji could have survived at some point.
Uh-huh. Well, or they could have just completely discarded his body, and that would have, given some major heel heat to Master Asia.
That's true.
But no, they didn't do it because they wanted to have that epic
So
moment.
you just wanted to wait until the possibility of it running out of energy because Kyoji died?
Before we wrap up this episode, we are coming up on the last 4 episodes of the series. So another question that I want to add in here is, what questions do you want answered that haven't been yet? Now, obviously, you brought up, why didn't Wong put Allenby in there? That's a good question. I don't know if you're going to get your answer. At least I can't tell you. But are there any other questions that you want to see happen?
Well, despite on who ends up winning this Grand Royale, what do you think is going to happen with the other, the members of the Shuffle Alliance if they survived? Are they going to be able to...
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Get, what they were seeking, even though they were not victorious?
I think another good question to ask is, and I'm thankful to say that in the next episode it will be revealed, why is Master Asia a bad guy?
That would be
because there are a lot of moments where it doesn't make sense for him to be. Why give your enemy the final technique, for example? Why do it? So that's one that I'd bring up. I will also say that I you need to have that final, I get it that they were together at the beginning, but now a lot has happened between Domon and Rain. Will they finally tie that knot? Will they finally be an official thing?
I mean,
or will it be Domon and Allenby? At that point, who does Rain hook up with?
Geez, and that makes you wonder what's going to happen to Dr.
She hooks up with Argo too, and then you have her in military. Well, I mean, she already has the Shadow Gundam outfit. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm being silly. Go ahead.
I was saying, what would happen to Dr. Mikamura now that...
Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Is he going to get the punishment that Dr. Kashu got? Makes you wonder. I brought this up earlier, but I'll bring it up here. So we know that Ulube and Mikamura went in this. What about Corrado? Was Corrado part of this? We don't know. He was never shown in the flashbacks. So at that point, is he part of this whole conspiracy, this plot?
If he wasn't, I can't imagine he would. Something happened to him too, but And
I guess another big question that we should ask is what's going to happen to the remains of the Dark Gundam? Because obviously, Domon's going to wreck it, but there's probably going to be some remains. What's going to happen to them? What are we going to do with them? It's still evil. Obviously it doesn't have a core life unit anymore. So we don't want to have it, go get over here and drag something else in there. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to dispose of the Dark Gundam? And more importantly, who will win the 15th Gundam fight to become the ruler of space? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this with Gundam Fight Final Battle! Ready? Go!